Good morning, friends. It is Tuesday. The kids are back in school, so this is crazy. My littles have been home with me for a while because they had a contact for COVID. So literally they've been home for like 2 weeks. They went to school for a week. Or no, they were home for a week and a half. They went to school for a day, and then they had Thanksgiving vacation. So I'm used to having them behind me on the couch trying to play video games, and they're not here for the first time in a long time. So we are also on for 2 days in a row. I know, don't fall over, because I am going out of town tomorrow. So my mom is getting married, and I can't wait. I'm flying to LA, so I'm trying to get us caught up so that we don't miss a ton of days like I've done many, many times. I'm so sorry. Imperfect obedience. I'm not the best at doing this every day. So we are part of the way ahead, and we're going to finish a couple readings today. It should not take very long, but thank you for being here with me. I'm excited about it, and we are in 1 Samuel. We're back there, chapter 28. So we're going to try to read up to chapter 31 in 1 Samuel and then jump back again to Psalms. So because we're reading the Bible in chronological order, we're reading it as it happened, not as it's put together, which honestly I don't understand why that's different. Like, why didn't you just write it as it happened? Why are we jumping? But I didn't do it, so I don't know. So we're in 1 Psalms, which is about David, and then we jump to Psalms where David's writing, and then we go back to 1 Psalms. So that's kind of why we're skipping around, so that it's happening in real time, because I like that. So 1 Samuel chapter 28, if you want to read along. Otherwise, I'm going to start reading to you. Okay. At that time, the Philistines mustered their armies for another war with Israel, and King Achish told David, "You and your men will be expected to join me in the battle." "Very well," David agreed. "Now you will see for yourself what we can do." Then Achish told David, "I will make you my personal bodyguard for life." Meanwhile, Samuel had died, and all of Israel mourned for him. He was buried in Ramah, his hometown, and Saul had banned all mediums and psychics from the land of Israel. The Philistines set up their camp at Shunem, and Saul and the armies of Israel camped at Gilboa. When Saul saw the vast Philistine army, he became frantic with fear. He asked the Lord what he should do, but the Lord refused to answer him, either by dreams or by sacred lots or by the prophets. Then Saul said to his advisors, "Find a woman who's a medium, so I can go and ask her what to do." His advisors replied, "There is a medium at Endor." I love that there's a Star Wars place in the Bible, like a real one. Endor. I would like to go there. I would like to go to wherever this is and visit Endor, because I'm a total Star Wars nerd and Endor exists. I'm just saying. So Saul disguised himself by wearing ordinary clothing instead of his royal robes. Then he went to a woman's home at night, accompanied by 2 of his men. "I have to talk to a man who has died," he said. "Will you call up his spirit for me?" "Are you trying to get me killed?" the woman demanded. "You know that Saul has expelled all the mediums and psychics from the land. Why are you setting a trap for me?" But Saul took an oath in the name of the Lord and promised, "As surely as the Lord lives, nothing bad will happen to you for doing this." Finally, the woman said, "Well, whose spirit do you want me to call up?" "Call up Samuel," Saul replied. When the woman saw Samuel, she screamed, "You've deceived me. You are Saul." "Don't be afraid," the king told her. "What do you see?" "I see a god coming up out of the earth," she said. "What does it look like?" "He looks like an old man wrapped in a robe," she replied. Saul realized that it was Samuel and fell to the ground before him. "Why have you disturbed me by calling me back?" Samuel asked. "Because I'm in deep trouble," Saul replied. "The Philistines are at war with us, and God has left me and won't reply by prophets or dreams. So I've called for you to tell me what to do." But Samuel replied, "Why ask me if the Lord has left you and has become your enemy? The Lord has done just as he said he would. He has taken the kingdom from you and given it to your rival David. The Lord has done this because you did not obey his instructions concerning the Amalekites. What's more, the Lord will hand you and the army of Israel over to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your sons will be here with me. The Lord will bring the entire army of Israel down in defeat." Saul fell full length on the ground, paralyzed with fright because of Samuel's words. He was also faint with hunger, for he had eaten nothing all day and all night. When the woman saw how distraught he was, she said, "Sir, I obeyed your command at the risk of my life. Now do what I say, and let me give you something to eat, so you can regain your strength for the trip back." But Saul refused. The men who were with him also urged him to eat, so he finally yielded and got up from the ground and sat on the couch. They had couches? Interesting. The woman had been fattening a calf, so she hurried out and killed it. She kneaded dough and baked unleavened bread, and she brought the meal to Saul and his men, and they ate it. Then they went out into the night. Chapter 29. The entire Philistine army now mobilized at Aphek, and the Israelites camped at the spring of Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers were leading out their troops in groups of 100 and 1,000, David and his men marched at the rear with King Achish. But the Philistine commanders demanded, "Where are these Hebrews, and what are they doing here?" Then Achish told them, "This is David, the man who ran away from King Saul of Israel. He's been with me for years, and I've never found a single fault in him since he defected to me." But the Philistine commanders were angry. "Send him back," they demanded. "He can't go into battle with us. What if he turns against us? Is there any better way for him to reconcile himself with his master than by turning on us in battle? Isn't this the same David who the men of women in Israel sing their dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. So Achish finally summoned David and his men. "I swear by the Lord," he told them, "that you are some of the finest men I've ever met. I think you should go with us, but the other Philistine rulers won't hear of it. Please don't upset them, but go back quietly." "What have I done to deserve this treatment?" David demanded. "Why can't I fight the enemies of my lord, my king?" But Achish insisted, "As far as I'm concerned, you're as perfect as an angel of God. But my commanders are afraid to have you with them in battle. Now get up early in the morning and leave with your men as soon as it gets light." So David headed back to the land of the Philistines when the Philistine army went on to Jezreel. This is not Harry Potter. This is actually the Bible. We're reading from the translation called The Book. It is my son's Bible, so it's easy to read and doesn't have a whole lot of strange words in it. We are in 1 Samuel chapter 30. Glad you're here. Okay, so 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home at their town of Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid into Negev and had burned Ziklag to the ground. They carried off all the women and children and everyone else without killing anyone. Well, that's refreshing. Normally they kill all women and children. When David and his men saw the ruins and realized what happened to their families, they wept until they could weep no more. David's 2 wives, Ahinoam of Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal of Carmel, were among those captured. David was now in serious trouble because his men were very bitter about losing their wives and children, and they began to talk of stoning him. But David found strength in the Lord his God, and then he said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought it, and David asked the Lord, "Should I chase them? Will I catch them?" And the Lord told him, "Yes, go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you." So David and his 600 men set out, and they soon came to Besor Brook. But 200 of the men were too exhausted to cross the brook, so David continued the pursuit with his 400 remaining troops. Some of David's troops found an Egyptian man in a field and brought him to David. They also gave him some bread to eat and some water to drink. They also gave him part of a fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins because he hadn't had anything to drink for 3 days and nights. I would have died. It wasn't long before his strength returned. "To whom do you belong, and where do you come from?" David asked him. "I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite," he replied. "My master left me behind 3 days ago because I was sick. We were on our way back from raiding the Kerethites in the Negev, the territory of Judah, and the land of Caleb, where we had just burned Ziklag." "Will you lead me to them?" David asked. The young man replied, "If you swear by God's name that you will not kill me or give me back to my master, I will guide you to them." So the Egyptian led them to the Amalekite encampment, and when David and his men arrived, the Amalekites were spread out across the fields, eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines and the land of Judah. David and his men rushed in among them and slaughtered them throughout that night and the entire next day until evening. That's a lot of slaughtering. Okay. None of the Amalekites escaped except the 400 young men. None of them escaped except 400. 400 is the amount of men that he has. Only 400 left. They fled on camels. David got back everything the Amalekites had taken, and he rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, nor anything else that had been taken. David brought everything back. His troops rounded up all the flocks and herds and drove them on ahead. These all belonged to David as his reward, they said. When they reached Besor Brook and met the 200 men who'd been too tired to go with them, David greeted them joyfully. But some troublemakers among David's men said, "They didn't go with us, so they can't have any of the plunder. Give them back their wives and children and tell them to be gone." But David said, "No, my brothers, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. He kept us safe and helped us defeat the enemy. Do you think anyone will listen to you when you talk like this? We share and share alike, those who go to battle and those who guard the equipment." From then on, David made this a law for Israel, and it is still followed. When he arrived at Ziklag, David sent part of the plunder to the leaders of Judah, who were his friends. He said, "Here is a present for you taken from the Lord's enemies." These gifts were sent to the leaders of the following towns where David and his men had been: Bethel, Ramoth Negev, Jatir, Aroer, Sifmoth, Eshtimoa, Rakol, the town of the Jerahmeelites, the town of the Kenites, Hormah, Borashan, Athak, Hebron, and all the other places that they had visited. Okay, not easy to say. All right, so that was 1 Samuel 28-31. Now we have to skip over to Psalm 18. So if you are reading along with me, we're going to Psalm 18, because chronologically that's what happens next. Okay. From the choir director, this is a psalm of David, and he sang this to the Lord the day that the Lord rescued him. Okay? I love you, Lord, you are my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my Savior. My God is my rock in whom I find protection. He is my shield, the strength of my salvation, and my stronghold. I will call on the Lord, who is worthy of praise, for he saves me from my enemies. The ropes of death surround me, the floods of destruction swept over me. The grave wrapped its ropes around me, and death itself stared me in the face. But in my distress I cried out to the Lord. Yes, I prayed to my God for help. He heard me from his sanctuary. My cry reached his ears. Then the earth quaked and trembled. The fountains of the mountains shook. They quaked because of his anger. Smoke poured from his nostrils, and fierce flames leapt from his mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from him. He opened the heavens and came down. Dark storm clouds were beneath his feet. Mounted on a mighty angel he flew, soaring on the wings of the wind. He shrouded himself in darkness, veiling his approach with dense rain clouds. The brilliance of his presence broke through the clouds, raining down hail and burning coals. The Lord thundered from heaven. The Most High gave a mighty shout. He shot his arrows and scattered his enemies. His lightning flashed, and they were greatly confused. Then at your command, O Lord, at the blast of your breath, the bottom of the sea could be seen, and the foundations of the earth were laid bare. He reached down from heaven and rescued me. He drew me out of the deep waters. He delivered me from my powerful enemies, from those who hated me and were too strong for me. They attacked me at the moment when I was weakest, but the Lord upheld me. He led me to a place of safety. He rescued me because he delights in me. The Lord rewarded me for doing right. He compensated me because of my innocence. For I have kept the ways of the Lord. I have not turned from my God to follow evil. For all of his laws are constantly before me, and I have never abandoned his principles. I am blameless before God, and I have kept myself from sin. Good job, David. The Lord rewarded me for doing right because of the innocence of my hands in his sight. To the faithful, show yourself faithful. To those with integrity, show integrity. To the pure, show yourself pure. But to the wicked, you show yourself hostile. You rescue those who are humble, but you humiliate the proud. Lord, you have brought light to my life, my God. You light up my darkness. In your strength, I can crush an army, and with my God, I can scale any wall. As for God, his way is perfect. All the Lord's promises prove true. He's a shield for all of those who look to him for protection. For who is God except the Lord? Who but our God is a solid rock? God arms me with strength, and he's made my way safe. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer, leading me safely along the mountain heights. He prepares me for battle. He strengthens me to draw a bow of bronze. You've given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand supports me. Your gentleness has made me great. You've made a wide path for my feet to keep them from slipping. You chased my enemies and caught them. I did not stop until they were conquered. I struck them down so that they could not get up, and they fell beneath my feet. You've armed me with strength for the battle, and you've subdued my enemies under my feet. You made them turn and run, and I have destroyed all who hated me. They called for help, but no one came to rescue them. They cried to the Lord, but he refused to answer them. I ground them as fine as dust carried by the wind, and swept them into the gutter like dirt. You gave me victory over my accusers. You appointed me as ruler over nations. People I don't even know now serve me. As soon as they hear of me, they submit, and foreigners cringe before me. They lose all their courage and come trembling from their strongholds. The Lord lives. Blessed be my rock. May the God of my salvation be exalted. He is the God who pays back those who harm me. He subdues the nations under me and rescues me from my enemies. You hold me safe beyond the reach of my enemies, and you save me from violent opponents. For this, O Lord, I will praise you among the nations, and I will sing joyfully to your name. You give great victories to your king, and you show unfailing love to your anointed, to David and to all of his descendants forever. Wow, that was a good song. Okay, so that was Psalm 18. So now we need to go to Psalm 121. See, that's what I don't understand. Why don't they just put them in order? Like, if that's what he just wrote, why doesn't the next one just come after it? Why is it all the way back here in 121? That's weird, right? So this is a song for the ascent to Jerusalem. Oh, I love this verse. Because it reminds me of The Sound of Music, which is probably wrong, because The Sound of Music should remind me of this. But I look to the mountains. Where does my help come? Does my help come from there? My help comes from the Lord, who made the heavens and the earth. He will not let you stumble and fall. The one who watches over you will not sleep. Indeed, he who watches over Israel never tires and never sleeps. The Lord himself watches over you. The Lord stands beside you as your protective shade. The sun will not hurt you by day, nor the moon at night. The Lord keeps you from all evil and preserves your life. The Lord keeps watch over you as you come and go, both now and forever. I like Psalm 121. Okay, 123 to 125. Psalm 123 to 125. That's where we are right now. Okay. I lift my eyes to you, O God, enthroned in heaven. We look to the Lord our God for his mercy, just as servants keep their eyes on their master, as a slave girl watches for her mistress at the slightest signal. Sorry, I can't read. Have mercy on us, Lord, have mercy, for we've had our fill of contempt. We've had our fill of the scoffing of the proud and the contempt of the arrogant. If the Lord had not been on our side, let Israel now say, if the Lord had not been on our side when people rose up against us, they would have swallowed us alive because of their burning anger against us. The waters would have engulfed us, a torrent would have overwhelmed us. Yes, the raging waters of their fury would have overwhelmed our very lives. Blessed be the Lord who did not let their teeth tear us apart. We escaped like a bird from a hunter's trap. The trap is broken and we are free. Our help is from the Lord who made the heavens and the earth. Those who trust in the Lord are as secure as Mount Zion. They will not be defeated, but will endure forever. Just as the mountains surround and protect Jerusalem, so the Lord surrounds and protects his people, both now and forever. The wicked will not rule the godly, for then the godly might be forced to do wrong. O Lord, do good to those who are good, whose hearts are in tune with you. But banish those who turn to crooked ways, O Lord. Take them away to those who do evil, and let Israel have quietness and peace. Okay, so now 128 to 130. That's what I mean. So we're skipping 126 and 127. That's so odd. All right, so 128. How happy are those who fear the Lord, all who follow his ways. You will enjoy the fruit of your labor, and how happy you will be, how rich your life. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine flourishing within your home. And look at all those children. There they sit around your table as vigorous and healthy as young olive trees. That is the Lord's reward for those who fear him. May the Lord continually bless you from Zion. May you see Jerusalem prosper as long as you live. May you live to enjoy your grandchildren, and may Israel have quietness and peace. From my earliest youth my enemies have persecuted me. Let Israel now say, from my earliest youth my enemies have persecuted me, but they've never been able to finish me off. My back is covered with cuts, as if a farmer had plowed long furrows. But the Lord is good. He has cut the cords and used the ungodly to bind me. May all who hate Jerusalem be turned back in shameful defeat. May they be as useless as grass on a rooftop, turning yellow when only half grown, ignored by the harvester and despised by the binder. And may those who pass by refuse to give him this blessing. The Lord's blessings be upon you. We bless you in the Lord's name. From the depths of despair, O Lord, I call for your help. Hear my cry, O Lord, and pay attention to my prayer. Lord, if you kept a record of our sins, who, O Lord, could ever survive? But you offer forgiveness that we might learn to fear you. I am counting on the Lord. Yes, I am counting on him. I put my hope in his word, and I long for the Lord more than centuries long for the dawn. Yes, more than centuries long for the dawn. O Israel, hope in the Lord. With the Lord there is unfailing love and an overflowing supply of salvation. He himself will free Israel from every kind of sin. Interesting. Okay. So that was Psalms 128 to 130. Okay, so our last thing that we're going to read for today is... Wait a minute. We were supposed to read 1 Samuel 28 to 31 and then Psalm 18. Apparently, I did not read 31. I read 28 to 30. Sorry. Okay. So, right, this is the very last chapter of 1 Samuel. Sorry, guys. I don't know how I did that. Okay, now the Philistines attacked Israel, forcing the Israelites to flee. Many were slaughtered on the slopes of Mount Gilboa, and the Philistines closed in on Saul and his sons. They killed 3 of his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. Oh, they killed Jonathan. The Philistines attacked Israel and killed Jonathan. That sucks. The fighting grew very fierce around Saul, and the Philistine archers caught up with him and wounded him severely. Saul groaned to the armor-bearer, "Take your sword and kill me before these pagan Philistines run me through and humiliate me." But his armor-bearer was afraid and would not do it. So Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When the armor-bearer realized that Saul was dead, he fell on his own sword and died beside the king. So Saul, 3 of his sons, his armor-bearer, and his troops all died together that same day. When the Israelites on the other side of the Jezreel Valley and beyond the Jordan saw their army had been routed and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their towns and fled. So the Philistines moved in and occupied their towns. The next day, when the Philistines went out to strip the dead, they found the bodies of Saul and his 3 sons on Mount Gilboa. So they cut off Saul's head and stripped off his armor. Then they proclaimed the news of Saul's death in their pagan temple and to the people throughout the land of Philistia. They placed his armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths, and they fastened his body to the wall of the city of Bethshan. When the people of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, their warriors traveled all night to Bethshan and took the bodies of Saul and his sons down from the wall. They brought them back to Jabesh, where they burned the bodies. They took their remains and buried them beneath the tamarisk tree at Jabesh and fasted for 7 days. So that's the end of Saul. That's crazy. Like, all of that ended that way. And I want to believe that I would have the guts to fall on my own sword, but I don't know. Falling on a sword is not like that's a lot, right? Because like if you fall on it wrong, are you going to keep stabbing yourself? Like, these are the things that I think about, which is probably not what you're supposed to think about when you're reading the Bible. Okay. Good morning. It's good to see you. We actually just finished 1 Samuel, so we're going to read a couple chapters of 2 Samuel before we're done today. I love David too. And good morning. I'm glad you guys are here. We just lost Saul. So we're in 2 Samuel, which, like the beginning of this little thing, covers approximately 40 years, the bulk of David's reign as king. So that's what we're going to read in the next couple chapters. And David's life illustrates good and evil. His sins are exposed to warn us, and his victories are recorded so that we can see what God does with someone who puts complete trust in him. God used David in spite of his faults because David had a willingness to admit his sins over and over again, no matter how miserably he failed. Well, okay. So the moral of the story is we're all sinners and we're all going to fail. How easily do we admit it, I guess? Not very easily for me. Okay, so we're going to read for 2 Samuel. Here's chapter 1. After the death of Saul, David returned from victory over the Amalekites and spent 2 days in Ziklag. On the 3rd day after David's return, a man arrived from the Israelite battlefront. He had torn his clothes and put dirt on his head to show that he was in mourning, and he fell to the ground before David in deep respect. Pause. How do you know that this guy is mourning and not like homeless? That's crazy. Some dirty guy with ripped clothes comes, and how do you know that he's mourning? "Where have you come from?" David asked. "I escaped from the Israelite camp," the man replied. "What happened?" David demanded. "Tell me how the battle went." The man replied, "Our entire army fled. Many men are dead and wounded on the battlefield, and Saul and his son Jonathan have been killed." "How do you know that Saul and Jonathan are dead?" David demanded. The young man answered, "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and I saw Saul there, leaning on his spear with the enemy chariots closing in on him. When he turned and saw me, he cried out for me to come to him. 'How can I help?' I asked him, and he said to me, 'Who are you?' I replied, 'I am an Amalekite,' and he begged me, 'Come over here and put me out of my misery, for I am in terrible pain and want to die.' So I killed him," the Amalekite told David, "for I knew he couldn't live." Okay, so he did fall on his sword, and it didn't necessarily kill him. That's the answer. Someone else has to help you. "I knew he couldn't live, so I took his crown and one of the bracelets so that I could bring them to you, my lord." David and his men tore their clothes in sorrow when they heard the news, and they mourned and wept and fasted all day for Saul and his son Jonathan, and for the Lord's army and the nation of Israel, because so many had died that day. Then David said to the young man who had brought the news, "Where are you from?" And he replied, I'm a foreigner, an Amalekite who lives in your land. Were you not afraid to kill the Lord's anointed one? David asked. And then David said to one of his men, kill him. What? So the man thrust his sword into the Amalekite and killed him. You die self-condemned, David said, for you yourself confessed that you killed the Lord's anointed one. No, he didn't. Saul had already killed himself. He was just helping. That's like killing a deer on the side of the road when they've already been hit by a car. That's awful. This is when I have problems with this situation. That guy should not have died. He was helping, and David just killed him. And good morning. When did you start using TikTok? I think I started, actually, I know exactly when I started. I started in July because I got Jack on July 4th. And I made a video like 2 days before that about bringing him home. And that was the first one that I had posted. So, July. All right. So, David composed a funeral song for Saul and Jonathan, and later he commanded that it be taught to all the people of Judah. It's known as the Song of the Bow, and it is recorded in the book of Jashar. I wish we could hear it. Wouldn't that be so cool? Your pride and joy, O Israel, lies dead in the hills. How the mighty heroes have fallen. Don't announce the news in Gath, or the Philistines will rejoice. Don't proclaim it in the streets of Ashkelon, or the pagans will laugh in triumph. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you or your slopes. For there the shield of the mighty was defiled. The shield of Saul will no longer be anointed with oil. Both Saul and Jonathan killed their strongest foes. They did not return from battle empty-handed. How beloved and gracious were Saul and Jonathan. They were together in life and in death. Except Saul tried to kill him with a spear. Did we forget all of this? They were swifter than the eagles and stronger than the lions. O women of Israel, weep for Saul, for he dressed you in fine clothing and gold ornaments. How mighty the heroes have fallen in battle. Jonathan lies dead upon the hills. How I weep for you, my brother Jonathan. Oh, how much I loved you. And your love for me was deep, deeper than the love of women. How the mighty heroes have fallen. Stripped of their weapons, they lie dead. Okay. Chapter 2. After this, David asked the Lord, should I move back to Judah? And the Lord replied, yes. Then David asked, which town should I go to? And the Lord replied, Hebron. David's wives were Ahinoam from Jezreel and Abigail, the widow of Nabal from Carmel. So David and his wives and his men and their families all moved to Judah, and they settled near the town of Hebron. Then Judah's leaders came to David and crowned him king over the tribe of Judah. When David heard that the men of Jabesh-Gilead had buried Saul, he sent them this message. May the Lord bless you for being so loyal to your king and giving him a decent burial. May the Lord be loyal to you in return and reward you with his unfailing love. And I too will reward you for what you have done. Now that Saul is dead, I ask you to be my strong and loyal subjects, like the people of Judah who have anointed me their new king. My favorite royal subject. But Abner, son of Ner, the commander of Saul's army, had already gone to Mahanaim with Saul's son Ishbosheth. There he proclaimed Ishbosheth king over Gilead, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, the land of the Asherites, and all the rest of Israel. Ishbosheth was 40 years old when he became king, and he ruled from Mahanaim for 2 years. Meanwhile, the tribe of Judah remained loyal to David, and David made Hebron his capital, and he ruled as the king of Judah for 7.5 years. One day, Abner led some of Ishbosheth's troops from Mahanaim to Gibeon. About that time, Joab, son of Zeruiah, led David's troops from Hebron, and they met Abner at the pool of Gibeon. The two groups sat down there facing each other from opposite sides of the pool. Then Abner suggested to Joab, let's have a few of our warriors put on an exhibition of hand-to-hand combat. All right, Joab agreed. So 12 men were chosen from each side to fight against each other. Each one grabbed his opponent by the hair and thrust his sword into the other's side so that all of them died. Okay. The place has been known ever since as the Field of Swords. The two armies then began to fight each other, and by the end of the day, Abner and the men of Israel had been defeated by the forces of David. Joab, Abishai, and Asahel, the 3 sons of Zeruiah, were among David's forces that day. Asahel could run like a deer, and he began chasing Abner. He was relentless and single-minded in his pursuit. When Abner looked back and saw him coming, he called out, "Is that you, Asahel?" "Yes, it is," he replied. "Go fight someone else," Abner warned. "Take on one of the younger men and strip him of his weapons." But Asahel refused and kept right on chasing Abner. Again, Abner shouted at him, "Get away from here. I will never be able to face your brother Joab if I have to kill you." But Asahel would not give up, so Abner thrust the butt end of his spear through Asahel's stomach, and the spear came out through his back. Ew. How do you thrust? Ew. How do you thrust? That's a very, like the butt end is the not sharp end. You'd have to hit him really hard to thrust the butt end of the spear through someone's stomach. And it came out through his back. So he stumbled to the ground and died there, do you think? And everyone who came by that spot stopped and stood still when they saw Asahel lying there. When Joab and Abishai found out what happened, they set out after Abner. The sun was just going down as they arrived at the hill of Ammah near Giah, along the road to the wilderness of Gibeon. Abner's troop from the tribe of Benjamin regrouped there at the top of the hill to take a stand. And Abner shouted down to Joab, "Must we always solve our differences with swords? Don't you realize the only thing we'll gain is bitterness towards each other? When will you call off your men from chasing their Israelite brothers?" Smart. Then Joab said, "God only knows what would have happened if you hadn't spoken, for we would have chased you all night if necessary." So Joab blew his trumpet, and the men stopped chasing the troops of Israel. That night, Abner and his men retreated through the Jordan Valley. They crossed the Jordan River, traveling all through the morning, and they did not stop until they arrived at Mahanahan, however the heck you say that. Meanwhile, Joab and his men also returned home, and when Joab counted his casualties, he discovered that only 19 men were missing, in addition to Asahel. But 360 of Abner's men, all from the tribe of Benjamin, had been killed. Joab and his men took Asahel's body to Bethlehem and buried them there beside his father. Then they traveled all night and reached Hebron at daybreak. This was the beginning of a long war between those who had been loyal to Saul and those who were loyal to David. As time passed, David became stronger and stronger, and Saul's dynasty became weaker and weaker. David's sons born into Hebron. Okay, so we're going to have some weird names coming at you. These are the sons who were born to David in Hebron. The oldest was Amnon, whose mother was Ahinoam of Jezreel. The second was Chileab, whose mother was Abigail. The third was Absalom, whose mother was Maacah. The fourth was Adonijah, whose mother was Haggith. The fifth was Shephatiah, whose mother was Abital. The sixth was Ithream, whose mother was David's wife, Eglah. These sons were all born to David in Hebron. As the war went on, Abner became a powerful leader among those who were loyal to Saul's dynasty. One day, Ishbosheth, Saul's son, accused Abner of sleeping with one of his father's concubines, a woman named Rizpah. And Abner became furious. "Am I a Judean dog to be kicked around like this?" he shouted. "After all I've done for you and your father by not betraying you to David, is this my reward, that you find fault with me about this woman? May God deal harshly with me if I don't help David to get all the Lord has promised him. I should just go ahead and give David the rest of Saul's kingdom, and I should set him up as king over Israel as well as Judah, from Dan to Beersheba." Ishbosheth didn't dare say another word because he was afraid of what Abner might do. And then Abner sent messages to David saying, "Let's make an agreement, and I will help turn the entire nation of Israel over to you." "All right," David replied, "but I will not negotiate with you unless you bring back my wife Michal, Saul's daughter, when you come." David then sent this message to Ishbosheth, Saul's son: "Give me back my wife Michal, for I bought her with the lives of 100 Philistines." Bought her. So Ishbosheth took Michal away from her husband Palti, son of Laish, and Palti followed along behind her as far as Bahurim, weeping as he went. Well, at least somebody loved their wife. Then Abner told him, "Go back home," so Palti returned. Meanwhile, Abner had consulted with the leaders of Israel. For some time now, he told them, "You wanted to make David your king. Now is the time. For the Lord has said, I have chosen David to save my people from the Philistines and from all their enemies." Abner also spoke with the leaders of the tribe of Benjamin, and then went to Hebron to tell David that all the people of Israel and Benjamin supported him. When Abner came to Hebron with his 20 men, David entertained them with a great feast. And then Abner said to David, "Let me go and call all the people of Israel to your side. They will make a covenant with you to make you their king, and then you'll be able to rule over everything your heart desires." So David sent Abner safely on his way. But just after Abner left, Joab and some of David's troops returned from a raid, bringing much plunder with them. When Joab was told that Abner had just been there visiting the king and been sent away safely, he rushed to see the king. "What have you done?" he demanded. "What do you mean by letting Abner get away? You know perfectly well that he came to spy on you and discover everything that you're doing." Joab then left David and sent messengers to catch up with Abner. They found him at the pool of Sirah and brought him back with them. But David knew nothing about it. When Abner arrived at Hebron, Joab took him aside at the gateway as if to speak with him privately, but he drew his dagger and killed Abner in revenge for killing his brother Asahel. When David heard about it, he declared, I vow by the Lord and my people that I am innocent of this crime against Abner. Joab and his family are the guilty ones. May his family in every generation be cursed with a man who has open sores or leprosy, or who walks on crutches, or who dies by the sword, or who begs for food. Wow. So Joab and his brother Abishai killed Abner because Abner had killed their brother Asahel at the battle of Gibeon. Then David said to Joab and all those who were with him, Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth. Go deep into mourning for Abner. And King David himself walked behind the procession to the grave. They buried Abner in Hebron, and the king and all the people wept at his graveside. Then the king sang this funeral song for Abner. Should Abner have died as fools die? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not chained. No, you were murdered, the victim of a wicked plot. And all the people wept again for Abner. David had refused to eat the day of the funeral, and now everyone begged him to eat. But David had made a vow, saying, May God kill me if I eat anything before sundown. This pleased the people very much. In fact, everything the king did pleased them. So everyone in Judah and Israel knew that David was not responsible for Abner's death. Then King David said to the people, Do you not realize that a great leader and a great man has fallen today in Israel? And even though I am the anointed king, these two sons of Zeruiah, Joab and Abishai, are too strong for me to control. So may the Lord repay these men for their wicked deeds. All right, this is the last chapter for today. We are reading 2 Samuel chapter 4. When Ishbosheth heard about Abner's death at Hebron, he lost all courage, and the people were paralyzed with fear. Now there were two brothers, Bana and Rechab, who were the captains of Ishbosheth's raiding parties. They were the sons of Rimmon, a member of the tribe of Benjamin, who lived in Beeroth. The town of Beeroth is now part of Benjamin's territory because the original people of Beeroth fled to Gittaim, where they still live as foreigners. Saul's son Jonathan had a son named Mephibosheth, who was crippled as a child. He was 5 years old when Saul and Jonathan were killed at the battle of Jezreel. When the news of the battle reached the capital, the child's nurse grabbed him and fled. But she fell and dropped him as she was running, and he became crippled as a result. Wait, what? He was crippled as a child, so he wasn't born crippled. They're saying that the lady dropped him as she was running. He was 5. How do you run carrying a 5-year-old? I've had 5-year-olds 4 times. They're not small. I'm not sure how you run carrying a 5-year-old. And when you carry them, you're carrying them like at chest level. So you're going to drop a kid from here, and they're going to hit the ground and be crippled for life? How the heck fast was this lady running? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Sorry, I'm very literal. That does not make any sense to me. But okay, he's crippled as a result. Maybe he broke his foot or something. Maybe back then that makes you crippled. But even still, how do you break your foot from falling from that high? Anyway, one day, Rechab and Bana, the sons of Rimmon, went to Ishbosheth's home around noon as he was taking a nap. The doorkeeper, who was sifting wheat, became drowsy and fell asleep. So they slipped past the doorkeeper, went into Ishbosheth's bedroom, and stabbed him in the stomach. Okay, then they escaped. But before leaving, they cut off his head as he lay there on his bed. So these were the captain of his raiding parties. And they just went to his home one day and came in and stabbed him in the stomach. And then he was laying there, they cut off his head. Okay, taking his head with them, they took his head, they fled across the Jordan Valley through the night, and they arrived at Hebron and presented Ishbosheth's head to David. Look, they exclaimed, here's the head of Ishbosheth, the son of your enemy Saul, who tried to kill you. Today the Lord has given you revenge on Saul and his entire family. But David said to them, as surely as the Lord lives, the one who saves me from my enemies, I will tell you the truth. Once before someone told me, Saul is dead, thinking he was bringing me good news. But I seized him and killed him. Yes, he did, and I did not understand why. That's the reward I gave him for his good news. Now what reward should I give the wicked men who have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed? Should I not also demand your very lives? So David ordered his young men to kill them, and they did. They cut off their hands and feet and hung their bodies beside the pool in Hebron. Then they took Ishbosheth's head and buried it in Abner's tomb in Hebron. Okay, that time I agree. I think those men did something wrong. Like, what? That they didn't need to do that. And clearly, David is not the kind of guy who rejoices when you bring him ahead. I wouldn't either. But I digress. So we are done for today. That was 2 Samuel chapters 1 through 4. Yay! And that's all that we had to read for today. So I'm going to be gone for the next couple days. Like I said, I'm going to a wedding. I cannot wait. And when I get back, I will catch up with you all then. I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your week and that you stay warm. It's starting to snow here in Pennsylvania, so I hope that you guys are warm and cozy, getting ready for Christmas, and that you have a great week. I will miss you, but I will see you in a couple days. Thanks for being here. Bye.